Today we're going to make a landscape painting inspired by artist Jen Aranyi. Jen Aranyi is a current day artist who works as a graphic designer and in her free time makes beautiful watercolor and pen and ink artworks. We're going to use her style today to create our own landscape painting. So we're going to start off with a rectangular piece of paper. And somewhere in the middle of this paper, I'm going to draw a rough zigzag line for my mountains. So when I draw mountains, I know that my zigzags are all going to be different lengths and different heights, just like real mountains. Next, I'm going to lightly sketch in kind of a straight-ish line underneath the mountain for the valley. Now, after I have my mountain and my valley line sketched out, I'm going to outline it with Sharpie. Before I add any pen and ink details, I'm going to watercolor paint the sky. You can choose to either use a warm colored sky or a cool colored sky. Today I think I'm going to do cool colors. So I'm just dipping my brush into water and getting a tiny little dip of blue paint onto my brush. Now I'm going to mix the water and blue paint together on my paper to create a really light blue watercolor paint. You're going to notice that I'm outlining my mountains first. I'm trying really hard to stay inside the lines. Now when my brush starts to get a little bit dried out, I can go back and get just another tiny little dip of water. If my paint seems too dark, then that means that I need to add more plain water to it. If I want to use a different type of watercolor, I'm going to have to add a little bit of water to this puddle. Liquid watercolors do not need water added to them, but these types of watercolors have to have a little water added before they'll work. And I'm just going to keep on going with my cool colors until my entire sky is filled in. While the watercolor paint is drying, we're going to very carefully start working on the details of our mountains. So I'm going to start by adding a shadow to the left side of each of my mountain. Now to make this easy, you'll notice that each mountain has a peak and a valley. Peak, valley, peak, valley. These areas are going to help me whenever I make my shadow. So the shadow is going to start at the peak, and I'm just going to draw kind of a wavy line. And I'm going to connect it to the valley. Now I'm going to go to this peak, draw that wavy-ish line, connect it to the valley. Peak, valley, peak, valley. Now I'm going to shade in these shadows with some lines. I don't need to color it all the way in. Just by adding these straight parallel lines, it's going to give it the look of a shadow. This is called hatching. And artists who use pen and ink a lot use this technique all the time. I am going to be a little bit careful that my lines stay inside the shadow. Now I'm done with my shadow, and I added a few small wavy lines for texture on the other side of my mountain. So now I'm going to go through and outline the line for my valley. And this is where the trees are going to grow in my picture. I'm going to start by drawing some short lines for trees that are very far away. And then I can draw longer lines for trees that are in the middle ground, and maybe even longer lines for trees that are in the foreground. I have another tree over here in the background. Now to make this tree look like a pine tree, I'm just going to sort of draw some little, almost scribbly lines that stick out from the trunk. I want my lines to be shorter at the top, and then they get a little longer as they get towards the bottom, giving this tree a cone shape, or like a triangle shape. You can decide how many trees you want to have in your landscape. When your trees are done, you can add a little more detail to the ground. Sometimes I like to add some short little wavy lines to show where maybe some grassy areas are. Maybe even I draw a few little blades of grass to fill in any blank spots. And when you feel that you've added enough details, then your watercolor and pen and ink landscape is complete.